You know what I like on controllers? Paddles. But I don't like paying the absolute insane price to get a controller with programmable paddles. Luckily, I might have a solution. That would be the StrikePack Horizon Vista, which is the newest version from Collective Minds. Taking a look at the box, it features 4 programmable buttons, endless mod customization, wired controller support, because it's only wired only, and compatible with both the new Xbox controller and the Xbox One controllers. There's also a companion app that comes along with this device. On the side of the box, they also advertise features like hair triggers, anti-recoil, and rapid fire, which are all part of the mod packs. With that said, let's get into reviewing the StrikePack Horizon Vista. The first thing I want to talk about is the setup process. Once you get your StrikePack, either from your local Walmart or the mail, and open the box, you'll be greeted with a warning card telling you to contact customer support before returning it. I've never contacted customer support because honestly, if something's wrong, I will just return it. After removing the plastic tray, you are greeted with the StrikePack Vista itself. It also includes 2 different types of attachments, depending on which style of controller you're using. At the bottom, there are 2 connector pieces, one for the USB Type-C and one for the micro USB. There's also a USB Type-C cable included in the box that is used to connect your StrikePack to the console. Once you take the StrikePack out of the box, you need to connect the correct backplate for your controller. Since I'm using a series controller, I'm using the backplate designed for that model. You also want to use the USB Type-C proprietary connection bridge that links the adapter to the controller. Next, grab an Xbox controller, remove your battery pack, and line up the StrikePack clip at the bottom, then align the plug at the front, push it in until you hear a satisfying click. Sometimes you need to make sure the USB Type-C connection is properly plugged in. And that's it! Your StrikePack is now attached to your controller. But before we get into the fun stuff, we need to update the StrikePack. Grab the included USB Type-C cable and plug it into your computer of choice, or if you have a phone that supports a Chrome browser, you could also use that. Connect your Xbox controller with the StrikePack to your computer, then search for StrikePack Horizon Vista Update. This should take you to the update page. From there, click Connect to Device. Open up the menu, select your StrikePack, then you see device information, which shows you the current firmware version. Of course, we want the newest version, so scroll down where it says latest version. For me, that's version 3.1.28. Click the update button and wait a few minutes. Once it's done, it should disconnect automatically, reconnect it, verify the firmware version, and once everything checks out, you're good to go. Now that we got the StrikePack fully up to date, connect it to the console of choice. For me, it would be my Xbox Series X. Next, let's download the companion app, which is available on both iOS and Android. Once it's installed, open the app. It may take a few moments to find your device. Once it does, you can start customizing your layout and programming the paddles to your liking. I do want to mention it may take a few times to get the device connected to the app. For me, sometimes it takes 2 or 3 refreshes before it fully connects. Hopefully this is something they fix in the future because it would be nice if it connected right away. That being said, let's go into a bit more detail about how the app works and how we can fully customize your experience using the StrikePack Horizon app. Once the app loads, you're greeted with the main interface. This is where you find your custom profiles for the most popular games. There are a few base profiles for general tuning, like recoil control, macros, and shooter presets. These act as a starting point, letting you build your own custom profiles from them. For demonstration, I'm going to create a custom Apex shooter profile. Once you load into that profile, at the bottom of the screen, you'll see mapping. If you're looking to map your buttons, you have 4 paddles on the back of your controller, labeled 1 through 4. These correlate directly with the button mapping in the app. You can map them however you like, but for me, button 1 is B, button 2 is A, button 3 is X, and button 4 is what I usually use for whatever the main component is in the game, Since this is an Apex preset, I'm going to use up on the D-pad, which is the healing button for Apex. Of course, you can customize these however suits your playstyle, but this is my personal setup when I'm using paddles. Next to mapping, there's the controller tab. This is where you can enable hair triggers and disable controller's vibration if you want more of a competitive setup. Next to that is block mods, which disables all the mods on the StrikePack. I would recommend turning this on if you're only using the StrikePack for paddles and not the mods, which I feel like most people that own these use that for. Then there's audio, which controls sound effects in the main system. Personally, I keep it turned off, but if you like the audio feedback, you can leave it on. Finally, there's the support tab, where you can access the digital manual or email Collective Minds directly if you run into any issues. At the top of the screen, you'll see active loadout. You can have up to 4 separate loadouts under one profile. Below that are primary weapon and secondary weapon settings. This is where you can customize your firing modes. Some of the base presets include regular fire, rapid fire, and rapid fire ADJ, which lets you adjust your firing rate. There are also tons of settings here, so it's really up to you to fine-tune what feels the best for your needs. Below that is the Anti-Recoil, which you can adjust both the vertical and horizontal movement. You can fine-tune it and even create different profiles for specific guns. It actually works surprisingly well. Next is the Game Pack mods, which gives you a quick access to the default mods like aim assist, auto hold breath, rapid melee, and rotational aim assist. If you enable the aim assist, it slightly moves your right stick left and right. This tricks the game into thinking you're moving the stick, which keeps the aim assist active and helps you track targets even better, especially in games like Apex Legends where the aim assist is super strong. Auto hold breath automatically holds your breath while sniping. Rapid melee rapidly presses the melee button for faster attacks. Rotational aim assist moves your right stick in a rotational circle, keeping your aim assist even more active. Below that is auto run, which lets you adjust different sprinting and running behaviors. The next section is active aim mods, which activates when you hold down your ADS button. You can have it automatically crouch, spam crouch, or perform turbo crouching, basically crouch spamming when you're ADSing. The active shot mode does something similar, but only activates when you pull the trigger to shoot your gun. It has the same crouch options available, but there's also a lot more you can go through and adjust. At the top of the screen, there is the setting icon. Click that to open a more detailed configuration menu. Here you can adjust button layout, stick layout, weapon swapping mode, generic fire settings. I recommend fine-tuning these settings depending on how you play each game. If you scroll down, you'll reach the advanced settings, where you can adjust the intensity of your aim assist, your fire rate, and your quick scoping speed. For example, I'll max out the aim assist so you can see how strong it can be. You can adjust it anywhere from 0 to 100. The same goes for the fire rate and the quick scoping settings. You can tweak how fast your scope activates or how quickly your weapon fires. There's also a few more settings, but generally that's all the stuff you really should worry about when you're in the main settings. Now I'm gonna back out and load into a custom Apex profile made by Collective Minds. These game-specific profiles are pre-made for the most popular titles. If your game isn't listed, you need to create your own custom profile, which is a bit of a bummer. Now that we're in the Apex profile, I'm going to grab a gun, let's say the car SMG, and hold down the primary weapon. Then you'll find presets under submachine guns and set it to the right gun you're using. There's plenty of different presets for all the weapons in Apex. This gives me a nearly perfect recoil pattern for that weapon. You can still tweak the settings further, but even the default ones are pretty solid. As you can see, when I switch between the R99 and the R31, the recoil remains very manageable. And if you want to fine-tune the recoil even more, you can manually adjust the vertical and horizontal recoil to get it just right. At the bottom, there's also custom settings for each character in Apex, which is a nice extra touch. And that's pretty much everything you can do with the app. It's super in-depth in terms of customization, giving you a lot of control over the StrikePack. So now that we got our StrikePack completely set up and ready to go, let's jump into some gaming. The first game I tested, of course, was Rainbow Six Siege, and it was a very enjoyable experience. I find that the paddle placement on the Horizon Vista feels much better than the regular Horizon model. As for the mods, they all work pretty well. The recoil control does need a bit fine-tuning, but nothing too crazy. The second game I played was the new Battlefield 6, and the StrikePack worked just as well here. I ran a rapid-fire mod on the secondary weapon and mainly used the paddles. The paddles are easily the biggest advantage. There's no preset for this game at the moment, but honestly, recoil control isn't something you really should worry about, especially in Battlefield. You're not going to be spraying down targets like you would in Rainbow Six Siege or Call of Duty. I also tried Call of Duty Black Ops 7's beta, which I enjoyed for the most part. The paddles again felt great and worked perfectly with the new wall jumping system. I noticed that the recoil control and aim assist were pretty dominant in this game, so the StrikePack was able to handle both very well. Of course, I had to test Apex Legends too, and I got a great experience with the StrikePack. Since this game already has a default StrikePack profile, I had basically zero recoil when I was playing. This is also a perfect example of how effective the aim assist mode can be, especially with how aggressive Apex's aim assist is. I also spent some time in Fortnite running the rapid fire mode and aim assist, and it worked pretty well for what it is. But again, the paddles are the main highlight, especially for competitive games like this. Now that's mostly positives, but I do have a few negatives I want to point out. The recoil control mode, for me, feels like a bit of a cop-out. Most games don't even have a very aggressive recoil control, and it doesn't take much to manage or learn the patterns for the recoil. From Rainbow to Call of Duty, even Battlefield, recoil is pretty manageable. The recoil mod pulls your joystick downwards when it activates, which completely throws me off since I'm already used to recoil control in most games. So it's definitely something that annoys me quite a bit. As for the aim assist, it's probably the best part of the mod pack, but even then, it can be infuriating when you're moving around. It slightly moves your joystick, and that can mess with your position of aiming or shooting in any game. The same goes for the rotational aim assist, and honestly, I think the rotational is a little worse because it moves your whole joystick instead of just moving it left and right like normal aim assist does. Personally, I never use it seriously. It throws off my sense and movement and control, especially in competitive games where I already have a good touch of what's going on. On the other hand, some mods were generally helpful, like slide canceling in Call of Duty. For my experience, it worked very well. Yes, it sometimes caused weird behaviors like spamming the B button, but overall it was fun to use. The presets for Apex Legends and Rainbow Six Siege also worked great. The built-in accessibility and configurations were solid and reliable. Where I think the StrikePack stands out is the paddle function. You can buy a $60 controller and add a StrikePack on for $40, and you basically have the same functions as an Elite Series controller, and the StrikePack offers a lot for its price. Now, the mods are a bit more controversial. Personally, I think they're a lot of fun. Rapid fire isn't hurting anybody, and the aim assist isn't game breaking. The same thing goes for the recoil. It could be a good advantage when it comes down to somebody that isn't good with recoil, but honestly, once you get used to the recoil control in most games, you don't need to use an anti-recoil script like this. It's pretty much useless. I personally think it's a disadvantage because it pulls down on your joystick when you're using on a StrikePack, and for me that throws off my aim and my precision really bad. But again, it comes down to the player that's using it and how much time you're going to put into learning how it works. Since we're on this topic, I also wanted to quickly compare the StrikePack Horizon and the StrikePack Horizon Vista. Both are essentially the same device, just designed differently. The regular Horizon has 4 straight back paddles like a SCUF controller, while the Vista has paddles on the sides, more like a PlayStation controller. That's clearly what they were going for with the design. Since the PlayStation version of the StrikePack Horizon was released around the same time, honestly, I think the Vista design is better. I usually only use 2 paddles on my Elite series because the back ones are just too far up for someone with big hands. But with the Vista's wider paddle placement, I actually find myself using all 4 paddles comfortably, which gives me a better overall experience. At the end of the day, I think the StrikePack can absolutely be worth it, depending on your situation. If you're looking to buy both a controller and a StrikePack, the price difference can vary depending on where you live. But most of the time, it still comes out cheaper than buying an Elite Series controller. Plus, if your standard Xbox controller breaks, you could just replace it and still keep all of your StrikePack functions. However, you're going to miss out on some of the deep customization options that the premium controllers offer. But in return, you get mod compatibility that can enhance your gameplay or even just add some fun. I generally think the StrikePack is a better deal than buying a full premium controller. Especially if you have big hands, I think the paddle placement on the StrikePack Vista is such a better design than the Elite series. But on the downside, this controller is only wired, so you will not have any sort of wireless functionality like a normal Xbox controller or the Elite series. But if you want paddles on a budget and some extra goodies like the mod packs, this is a solid buy. I would 100% recommend picking up one, especially if you can find it under the $50 mark. But if you're not interested in the mods or spending a little less money on a controller, then I would save up your money and buy the Elite series or the PlayStation Pro controller. They are way more expensive, but you do get a little bit more in-depth joystick configurations than a normal Xbox controller, because the StrikePacks can only do so much. Back in the day, I couldn't afford an expensive controller, so I picked up the original StrikePack, and I've been a fan of it ever since. Yeah, the mods may not work the greatest, and they're kind of a gimmick in my personal opinion, but the biggest selling point for me has always been the paddles, and that's where I stand. And that brings us to the end of the video. If you like this, please like and subscribe. I do have more in-depth content about the StrikePacks or funny videos I made with them through the years, so I would recommend checking those out. But otherwise, peace out.